The year was 1812. The United States, not yet 50 years old, faced a world dominated by empires. Across the Atlantic, Great Britain was locked in war with Napoleon's France, but its actions would soon drag America into conflict. The War of 1812 would test the young republic's resolve and force Americans to define their nation's identity. It was a messy, often forgotten war, but one that shaped America's future. The fighting raged on land and sea, from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico. Some called it Mr. Madison's War, others a second war for independence. The nation was divided. Federalists in New England threatened secession, while others burned with patriotism. Britain's Royal Navy ruled the seas. America's Navy and Army were tiny by comparison. Yet, the U.S. had advantages: home ground, motivated defenders, and a distracted British enemy. The war would see heroism, blunders, cities burned, and a national anthem born. It was more than battles. It was a crucible forging a new American identity. The War of 1812 proved the United States was here to stay. It was a fight for respect, freedom, and the future. The world watched to see if the American experiment would survive. The stakes were nothing less than the nation's honor and destiny. The war's outcome would echo for generations. It was a fiery test, and America would never be the same. The War of 1812, a struggle for survival and self-definition. It was a turning point in the story of the United States. The young nation stood at a crossroads. The world would soon know if America could endure. One of the greatest insults to American pride was British impressment, seizing American sailors and forcing them into the Royal Navy. This violation of sovereignty outraged the nation and fueled calls for action. Trade was another flashpoint. Britain and France tried to strangle each other's economies, trapping American merchants in the crossfire. U.S. ships risked seizure by both sides, devastating the American economy. Jefferson's embargo, meant to pressure Europe, only hurt Americans more. Meanwhile, settlers pushed west, clashing with native tribes defending their lands. Tecumseh, a Shawnee leader, tried to unite the tribes against American expansion. Many Americans believed the British in Canada were arming native resistance. Fears of a British-Indian alliance stoked anger and urgency on the frontier. Impressment, trade restrictions, and frontier conflict created a perfect storm. Each issue was a blow to American honor, prosperity, and security. The nation was pushed ever closer to war. The question was no longer if, but when. Tensions reached a breaking point. The old empire's shadow loomed large. America was ready to fight for its rights. War was on the horizon. By 1810, a new generation of leaders, war hawks, rose in Congress, demanding action. Young, ambitious, and fiercely nationalistic, they were tired of British insults and failed diplomacy. Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun led the charge, arguing that only war could defend American honor and secure the nation's future. They saw opportunity-free trade, sailors' rights, and even the conquest of Canada. The Warhawks' message resonated with a frustrated public. Stories of impressed sailors and frontier attacks fueled a desire for action. The dream of manifest destiny expanding across the continent took hold. Warhawks promised a quick, glorious victory. President Madison, cautious but pressured, saw no other choice. In June 1812, he asked Congress to declare war on Great Britain. For the first time, the United States declared war as a nation. The die was cast. America was committed to a fight for its sovereignty. The Warhawks had their war. The nation braced for conflict. The world watched as America took its stand. The countdown to battle had begun. The War of 1812 was underway. The war began with bold plans to conquer Canada, plans that quickly unraveled. The American army, small and poorly led, suffered humiliating defeats. At Detroit, General Hull surrendered without a fight, shocking the nation. Militia proved unreliable, and the dream of easy conquest died on the frontier. But at sea, the tiny U.S. Navy stunned the world. Frigates like the USS Constitution, old Ironsides, defeated British ships in dramatic duels. These victories boosted morale and became legendary. On Lake Erie, Oliver Hazard Perry's fleet won a crucial battle, forcing the British to abandon Detroit. "We have met the enemy, and they are ours," Perry declared. Control of Lake Erie turned the tide in the West. The war was no longer a one-sided disaster. American resilience began to show. The nation found heroes in unexpected places. The fight for survival continued. The war's outcome was far from certain. America's fate hung in the balance. In 1814, with Napoleon defeated, Britain turned its full might on America. British troops landed in Maryland and marched on Washington, D.C. The American militia collapsed at Bladensburg. The capital fell. British forces burned the Capitol and President's House, a national humiliation. But Baltimore was ready. Fort McHenry stood strong against a 25-hour bombardment. The defenders held firm. The British failed to take the city. Francis Scott Key, witnessing the attack, wrote a poem that became the Star-Spangled Banner. The successful defense of Baltimore was a turning point. American pride surged. The nation refused to surrender. The war's darkest hour gave birth to its anthem. America's spirit endured. The fight was not over. As battles raged, diplomats met in Ghent to end the war. Both sides made bold demands, but neither would yield on key issues. British hopes for an Indian buffer state and territorial gains faded as American resistance stiffened. War weariness set in on both sides. The Treaty of Ghent, signed on Christmas Eve 1814, restored the status quo. No territory changed hands. The causes of war, impressment and trade, remained unresolved. On paper it was a draw, but the war's end brought relief and a new sense of national confidence. News of peace traveled slowly. Before it arrived, Andrew Jackson's forces won a stunning victory at New Orleans. The battle, fought after the treaty, became legendary. Jackson emerged a national hero. The war's final moments shaped America's memory of the conflict. The peace held. The nation looked to the future. The Battle of New Orleans unleashed a wave of patriotic pride. Andrew Jackson became a national hero. Americans believed they had won. The era of good feelings followed with new unity and optimism. The war spurred American industry, especially in New England. Forced to produce their own goods, Americans laid the groundwork for future growth. For Native Americans, the war was a disaster. Tecumseh's dream of resistance died. Tribes lost land and power. White settlement surged westward. The failed invasions of Canada fostered a sense of Canadian identity and peaceful U.S.-Canada relations. The border was demilitarized, setting the stage for future partnership. The U.S. military learned hard lessons, leading to reforms and a stronger army. The war's legacy was complex, triumph and tragedy intertwined. America emerged more unified, but at great cost to Native peoples. The nation's character was forever changed. The War of 1812 closed one chapter and opened another. America was ready to shape its own destiny. Why does the War of 1812 matter? It was a defining moment in America's story. The young nation stood up to the world's greatest empire and survived. The war confirmed American independence and forged a new national identity. Heroes like Jackson and Perry, symbols like the Star-Spangled Banner, united a divided people. Americans began to see themselves as one nation, not just a collection of states. The war accelerated westward expansion and industrial growth. It set the stage for a new generation of leaders and a new era. America turned inward, focusing on its own destiny. The War of 1812 was not a clear military victory, but it was a psychological and political triumph. It was a test the nation needed to pass. The war's legacy is survival, resilience, and the forging of a national character. It is America's forgotten fight for identity. In the crucible of conflict, a nation was born anew.